What is cinema? How is it defined, and what is the difference between just a movie and cinema, and who gets to decide which is which? When I was in community college, I took an introduction to cinema class. We studied films like Moonlight, Lady Bird, and Some Like It Hot. While I enjoyed a lot of the films we talked about, admittedly, I really just wanted to talk about films like Star Wars and Avengers and why those movies were so great. I'm biased to be sure, but I think there's a sense of superiority that certain films have over others. I first noticed this when I found Martin Scorsese's 2019 Empire magazine interview. He talked about his experience with Marvel movies saying, quote, "That's not cinema. Honestly, the closest I can think of them is theme parks. It isn't the cinema of human beings trying to convey emotional, psychological experiences to another human being." Hearing this, I really started to question how I felt and whether or not I agreed with him. The short answer is, while I agree with him to some extent, there's a lot of value in these films that people don't often talk about, and I'd like to change that. I like to point out why franchise films aren't quote-unquote ruining Hollywood, and how there's room for both franchise films and cinematic films. The truth is, I love movies. It's a big part of my life and what I enjoy, and even influences what I study in college. And as such, when these films are underwritten, or it's clear the filmmakers don't understand the story or the characters they're presenting, it can be frustrating to watch because you just wish they did a better job. One of the most prominent complaints audiences have these days with Hollywood is the insane number of remakes, reboots, and sequels. Now, there is a lot of politics involved in these decisions too, but strictly sticking to the creative side of things, it can be hard not to roll your eyes and say, well, now one of my favorite movies is going to be ruined. I think there's been plenty of examples where this has rung true for me, such as Beauty and the Beast and The Last Jedi, but this isn't always the case. A couple examples of this is the live-action remake of Cinderella made in 2015 and The Jungle Book in 2016. Both of these movies understand the source material they're pulled from, while also adding to the story and putting in their own creativity. They also worked because they were actually remaking films that weren't quite cultural masterpieces. Research was also done on this, confirming that remakes of films that had room to improve actually did better because audiences could fathom that they might be better than the original. These good qualities of remakes are worth noting because they can often get thrown a blanket statement about their quality that doesn't always apply. Just because something is from a franchise or is a remake, it doesn't mean it should automatically be underestimated. Also, audiences and critics tend to criticize these franchise films because they just make so much money, and audiences go buy tickets to see them instead of new original films, even when they aren't any good. But it's important to acknowledge the changing entertainment industry. A study conducted in 2017 found that big-budget films with thrilling, exciting experiences have a higher demand in theaters than smaller independent films, because people just want to stay at home and would rather stream on Netflix or HBO Max. And personally, when I go to the theaters, it's always with friends, and it's always for a film that's fun and something that all of us are interested in, such as Marvel, Star Wars, or Disney. Most people aren't looking to go to the show to deeply analyze the screenplay. They just want to be entertained. And besides, independent films are not being booted out of the entertainment world. They still have a place on streaming services and find success, especially foreign films like Parasite. In fact, I watched Parasite for the first time on HBO Max, and I loved it. So let's get back to Martin Scorsese's comments. Whether or not you agree with him, he's an extremely talented and successful director who is obviously entitled to his opinion. Are Marvel movies Taxi Driver or The Wolf of Wall Street? Definitely not, but personally, I do think there's a lot more value in them than he gives them credit for. Even from just a technical standpoint, the idea that this large collection of movies are interconnected in a way that for the most part makes sense is a huge accomplishment. Marvel's first installment, Iron Man, is a well-loved film and was even recognized on the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, praised for its astounding visuals, its performance by RDJ, and the complex character that he plays. Many of the films come together to offer a complex story arc for its characters. Thor, for example, in Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. He fails to kill Thanos and goes into a depressive, alcoholic state, isolating himself from the world. Audiences see him lose his mother, his father, his brother, his best friend, and his kingdom, and it's understandable that he becomes jaded, lost, and hopeless, and eventually gives up his call to the throne. In his own words,
"It's time for me to be who I am rather than who I'm supposed to be."
I think this is still a character that does convey emotional, psychological experiences to other human beings. The bottom line is franchise films can often get a bad rap for being the most prominent kind of film in theaters today. But this is more than the studios lobbying for those kinds of films to be made. The truth is, the entertainment world has evolved and changed by streaming, and this is important to acknowledge. These franchise films still have value, and yet should still be justly critiqued, held highly for its merit where it has it, and criticized where it fails, just as any cinematic film would be.